Hi, and welcome to What's It Like podcast with YORX. Today we have in studio with us another good friend of mine. His name is David. Say hi to the people, David.
Hello.
And David is a friend of mine who is, uh, he can tell you his age. As a matter of fact, David, introduce yourself to the people out there.
Well, I'm just turned 24 years old, and did you want me to tell them about my job and what I do for a living?
Anything that you're anything that you're okay with.
Yeah, I'm into security. I do security work in the city. Been a manager for a few years. I don't know. Me and Yorkwin met before all of that when I was just a lowly janitor going to church.
I wouldn't call it a lowly janitor because I actually was while I was in college I also did janitorial work, and sorry about that. And so one of the things that growing up for me, which you guys will find out more as the podcasts go on, I actually worked on a chicken farm, and on the chicken farm I did everything, and it was a huge industrial chicken farm.
Those things are a mess, man.
Yeah,
I've visited them.
yeah, a huge industrial chicken farm, and as a result of that, I've done feeding of chickens, taking up dead chickens, the whole works. And then even when I went to college, I also was doing janitorial work at college. So as a result of that, it still caught me.
We both have a background in cleaning, man.
Exactly. So, and even every single job that I go to, if I come upon people who clean the space, I speak to them as if was speaking to a normal regular coworker.
Yes.
So I don't
I,
look.
I think cleaning is probably one of the underrated jobs in the world.
Yes.
It's enormously necessary. It's needed in almost every industry. And at the same time, it's probably extremely underappreciated.
Yes, yes. And one of the reasons also why I brought David on is because David, similar to myself, I have 3 years experience in it. I am I am a I am a what you call it there, a new father. I have a 3-year-old, and David, how old is Gideon?
Just turned 5 months.
5 months.
5 months
Okay.
on the 21st.
5 months on the 21st. And how is it being a new father?
How shall we begin? Enormously rewarding,
Hmm.
I would say would be the word. But I think probably one of the most stressful experiences that I think a guy's ever going to handle in life.
Yeah.
Because everything now counts. It's not like I lose my job, oh, no big deal, I'll just go crash on my friend's couch.
Hmm.
It's like I got a wife, I got a little guy that's completely helpless, and he's reliant on me for everything. And I think just that responsibility, like I try not to let it like get to you and overwhelm you and stress you out, because if you do that, you're not going to be able to survive.
Hmm.
So I think one thing that I got as a gift, I suppose, is being objective about life. I've never let problems or circumstances depress me or get me down. It's always a challenge that there's always a solution to it.
Hmm.
And I think that's the beauty of life, is that whatever problem that you face, there's always a solution. If it's a matter of a means of income, there's a million different ways to make money. If it's a matter of, finding something to do with your life and figuring out what your talent is, like there's so many different things you can try. And the same with being a dad is like, it's another one of those challenges that I think every guy who wants to have a family is going to run into at some point.
Hmm.
And it's just all in how you approach it. It's nothing too crazy. Take it one day at a time. And I think for me, it's just been the most rewarding experience of my life, like seeing that little guy looking at you and smiling,
Yeah.
and, just seeing your own likeness in him. It's like, wow, this is crazy. This is awesome.
I know, right? And it's the same thing, similar thing with me, because before having Michaela, I was like, happy go lucky. If I saw something, I could buy it.
Of course.
But no, it's like everything has a purpose.
Yes.
Everything has a total direction. And for me, even doing this podcast, it has a direction whereby if let's say, for example, God forbid, I am unable to interact or speak with my kids when they are our age, they can then look at these or listen to these in the future and say, oh, this is the kind of guy that dad was.
Yeah.
You know,
I got you.
It's
Legacy.
Legacy, exactly. Everything is headed towards some kind of a legacy. And for me, even how I now interact with even regular people on the street, or even people who I just meet, there is a purpose, and it is towards making a future possible and brighter for the next generation, which is
Yes.
my child.
I think it's really completely changed my view on like saving money. That's probably the biggest effect in the short term that I've seen. Like now I'm like super concerned about like building a future for Gideon, making sure like he has like money that he can use when he gets older, which is something I never had access to. And like just I think every parent wants to create this, you know, perfect world for their child. And I think every parent tries and miserably fails at that from my observations.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good thing to try. Like I think we always want to make a better life for our next, you know, like you say, the next generation. We want to make a better life for them, and we want to, you know, try and prevent them from making the same mistakes we made. But I think you also have to balance that with a bit of the reality is that we were all that age too, and we all thought our parents were idiots,
Yes.
and we knew better than them.
Yes.
So
Yes.
rest assured, our kids are going to think the exact same way about us, and
Like, you're so old.
that's just going to be us, man.
Yep.
We're going to be looking at our kids like, why are you so dumb?
Exactly.
And they're going to be like, no, we're not dumb. We're the smartest people ever.
Exactly.
So I think so long as you can keep that in the back of your head and realize, one thing I never wanted to forget was that I was a child. And I think a lot of adults forget that fact, that they were once children and they made mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think so long as you can keep in your head, you know, I was once a child. I made dumb moves. I didn't save money when I should have saved money and whatever, right? Keep that in your head. I think you'll live a lot less stressed of a life.
Before we go any further, we want to thank our sponsors, Walters Weddings. Based in one of the world's best countries for destination weddings, that's Jamaica, and also we have offices in Canada, Walters Weddings is your go-to media company. Whether it's photography, live streaming, drone photography, or cinematography, contact our award-winning team at waltersweddings.com and talk to Tina. We're also available for weddings as far north as Canada to as far south as South America. Now, back to our program. I'm glad that we're down this path because, as you mentioned earlier, we met, you know, while you were attending church and stuff like that.
Yes.
And we've both, especially you, have gone through many different rigmaroles and many different stuff, especially
Life happens, man.
yeah. Tell me about the whole church experience and how it was for you and what's some of the reasons, or give me some perspective of what's it like leaving the church per se.
For sure. Well, one thing you know about me, Yorquin, I'm a very open and honest guy. I'm an open book. I love to talk about stuff. So I think to fully understand kind of why I left the church is to also understand where I came from. I was raised in the church. I was from birth Seventh-day Adventist. My parents were extreme Seventh-day Adventists in some respects. You could say my dad lived in the bush. We were not in a city. I was homeschooled. I was vegan. It checks all the boxes of a very conservative Adventist family. And not many Adventists, I would say, have that experience, so I can't speak for all. But I can speak for the fact that I was raised around Ellen White and reading her books incessantly. I read a lot of the books myself. I have books still that are marked with dates and times of when I read them. And so I was immersed in it. So growing up, I felt like I had a lot of knowledge about
Mm-hmm.
God. And I think when I was very little, like maybe 6 or 7, I had this one experience where I was doing devotions and I was praying, and I kind of felt like a presence of God there.
Yeah.
And it was just this peaceful, most wonderful experience. And I always kind of clung to that as this is kind of my only experience with God so far,
Mm-hmm.
but I want more.
Yeah.
And so becoming a teenager, and many people would say growing up very isolated, and I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know a lot about the world. I didn't know a lot
Mm-hmm.
about what was out there. I had a very narrow-minded perspective on life.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first job was kind of throwing me to the wolves, where I worked in a mechanic shop around a bunch of filthy-mouthed mechanics that could do nothing but googie eye at the women walking by. And
Yeah.
one of the sales girls would walk out, and the one guy from the back would walk all the way to the front just to see her.
Wow.
Oh, what's she wearing today? Ooh, did you see that? And it was just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, eye roll. Like I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I was so uncomfortable, and they saw that, right? And they just picked me apart like a bunch of vultures
Mm-hmm.
because they saw, here's this innocent little guy. Let's corrupt him, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's weird how, even you could say sinners, so to speak, they're very much evangelists in their own
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
which struck me about it. And it's like, the way of the world is very much its own kind of religion to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So after that whole experience, 2.5 years in that shop, and I never swore once.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe I swore once, but that was about it. Like I never joined in any of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff there. I kept myself very much apart.
Mm-hmm.
And after working there for 2 years, I started thinking, and I was just like, well, how much different from these guys am I?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the back of my head, I'm swearing every day. I'm upset. I'm angry, and I'm taking it out, but in my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I always remembered like the whole story in the Bible about, either be hot or be cold, don't be lukewarm.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm kind of kidding myself here,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to give it more of a
Try.
chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I moved here to the city, and at that time I was in a relationship with somebody in the church.
Mm-hmm.
We had met when I was in school, and I'm still hanging out with the religious folks, but more liberal, obviously, religious folks. And again, I wanted to join. I wanted to chase after that experience. I wanted that relationship with God, so to speak. And so I figured, well, becoming a member or getting baptized, that would maybe give me that experience, right? I didn't expect it like right away, but I figured at least by joining, I would be given more of a chance.
Mm-hmm.
So I joined, and it was an amazing Sabbath. Of course, my parents were there. Everyone was super happy. And then after that, nothing really happened, and I was just kind of like twiddling my thumbs here like I am on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, well, am I going to be given a job? Like, am I going to be given something to do? Is there something for me to do even? And I looked around the church, and the whole AY ministry was kind of falling apart. There wasn't a lot of people willing to run it.
Mm-hmm.
The choir was falling apart. Nobody wanted to come to practice. I didn't see a lot of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you ever talk to my Taekwondo teacher, and that's a completely different side story of my life, where I
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was into martial arts for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
I dedicate my life to it. And if I'm putting my head to something, if I'm going to be part of something, I want to be 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to any boss that I've ever worked for. Maybe that could be why I'm successful at whatever I do. But if I'm going to commit to a job, and Christianity is no different, I want to commit 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was involved in the church, I didn't see people committing 100%, to be honest, man. And you could say maybe comparing people to people, and we shouldn't do that. But when you see the whole church just coming to church on Saturday and warming the pews and listening to the sermons and, refreshed, and then they go home and
Nothing.
switch on the Xbox, switch on the TV. All the young people in the church were smoking weed in their parents' basement and playing loud music, and just, it was like, really, guys? Like, nobody's like taking this seriously? And that's what I really saw, is like nobody took it serious. It wasn't a way of life for them. It was something they did. It was a part of their routine during the week. It wasn't anything more. And to me, religion was a way of life. I grew up with that, and I expected that. So perhaps my expectations were a little bit high, and perhaps my whole viewpoint was a little bit warped on it. But for me, religion should be something that permeates your entire existence. And no matter what you're doing, it should have some connection.
Yeah.
Also, for me, the church should be an organization that it is part of the community. It's not just a building in the community that nobody knows about. And this is something I actually brought up to the pastor one time, and I was just like, well,
Yeah.
go knock on the doors of the people around our church.
Mm-hmm.
Go all around just the adjacent houses, knock on the door and ask them, what do you know about the church? Who are they? What do they stand for?
Oh, okay.
And see what answers you get. I guarantee nobody knows who we are, from even the people right next to us.
Mm.
And that upset me a lot, and I wanted to do something about it. But at the same time, when you see nobody else is interested and you're the only one, now it's just like, I'm drowning.
Wow. That like there's a
There's a lot to
whole
unpack.
lot to unpack
There's
there.
a lot to unpack. We could have a couple of podcasts just on that.
I know, and we will visit it sometime very, very soon. I promise you that. But one of the things that you said earlier in the beginning of the story, well, in the middle of the story, was when you saw that church was something that they did and not a way of life.
Yes.
And that is something that really spoke to me, because I remember or just since you came into the studio,
Mm-hmm.
we were talking, and I was saying to you that if I hear swearing,
Yeah.
I am okay with hearing it, because I used to live in, like, when I was going to college, even though it wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist college, I was still
Surrounded by it.
surrounded by
Of
swearing
course,
and
it's in
all
the
of that
music,
stuff.
it's in the culture, it's
Exactly.
everywhere.
So as a result of that, now I was immersed in it, and I
Mhm.
was okay. But I promised myself that since then, if in my house, it would be a non-swearing house,
Yes.
and that would be a part of life for me, because what I try to do is that I try to be the sermon
Mhm.
and not go and preach to someone, say to be this person or to be that person. And that is something that you know, I'm sure you know that the verse which says train up a child,
Yes.
right? And I actually found myself one day, which it will be in the book, in the dance hall on
Mm-hmm.
New Year's night, New Year's Eve, whatever. And I said to myself, and this was while I was in college, because you know, you go to college, you get the first taste of freedom.
Of course.
I said, you know, God, this is it. I'm done with this life, and I'm coming back to you. If you can get me out of this situation,
Yeah.
I will live my life for you from now on. So, so when you said that church was something that they did and not a way of life, it was like, that seems to be one of the main common threads that if you go down to the base grassroots of it, churches seems to be something that people do now,
It is.
and not necessarily what
You
a type
know,
of life.
something that I learned a lot from doing martial arts, and I appreciate my time there. I do it again. The thing that my grandmaster taught is that he didn't, first of all, he didn't accept apologies. He didn't like people apologizing for doing something wrong. He just wanted you to do it right.
Mhm.
Secondly, for him, it was a way of life. And that's something I had mad respect for. He did his patterns every day. He practiced with his students every day. You know, even when he would greet people outside of the dojo, you would greet each other in a certain way that showed respect for the person's rank and for the person's placement within the whole club, right? So I saw that and I was just like, wow. And even in the club, not a lot of people took that very seriously. They would greet each other outside like, whatever, hi buddy. But in the club, it was like, you have your little way of bowing to each other and whatever, calling each other this and that, different titles. So even in that respect, I saw like some people just did it and some people lived it. And I think that goes for a lot of life. And for me, what I wanted to do is I wanted to be honest. First and foremost, I don't think God appreciates somebody who's just playing a role. And so when I saw the kids and the young people in the church playing roles and just pretending to be Adventists on Saturday, and when they really didn't want to be Adventists, I was just like, well, why would I be kidding myself here? I don't want to do all of these rules. I don't want to adhere to this lifestyle. This is not for me. So why should I pretend and go to church and honestly, at the end of the day, show a bad example. And that's something that I'm most concerned with, is I don't want to show people an example like I'm some holy roller that goes to church every day
Holy
and
roller.
yeah. Well,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, for me, it's I don't want to be that kind of guy. I want to be me. I want to be the most honest person. I think God would have respect for a guy that truly says, you know what, take it for what it's worth. This is not the lifestyle for me. This is not the thing that I want to adhere to.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you guys and I have respect for everybody that wants to follow that, but no thank you. And I think even Jesus would respect somebody like that if he were to meet you and talk to you and you're not convinced of it. Well, it is what it is. For me, my life has now turned to I want to be the kind of guy that can have a conversation with anyone, that can be a friend to anyone. I don't want to let, like, I've seen so many religious people, especially my own parents, where they will not associate with people because they're a different religion or they believe differently or they adhere to different values. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the friend to everyone, and if you need me in a time of trouble, I'm there for you. And you know that about me, Yorkwin. Like,
Yes.
if you need my help, I'm here. If
Definitely.
if you have something going on that you're in trouble with,
Definitely.
I'll do my best to help you out. And that's the kind of
Definitely.
human I want to be.
Definitely.
And I think that's the most that could be expected from anyone, to be honest. I would expect my kid to be the same way, and I would hope that, you know, everybody that we associate with would be similar. The unfortunate fact about humanity, of course, is that everyone's selfish and greedy, and you
And
get
everyone
taken
is the hero in their own story.
yeah, and you get taken advantage of so much if you're a nice person.
And
So
I do appreciate that. I appreciate you as a friend, as a brother, and
absolutely.
I tell people that, you know, like there are some people in my circle whereby I say, this is my brother, this is my relative, whatever, and blood could not really make a difference. And
No.
David is one of those people,
Appreciate that, man.
because, you know, sorry, I'm just thinking about some of the blood relatives that I have,
Yes.
that I would say that, you know, strangers such as yourself has treated me better than some
I
of the
agree.
blood relatives that I
In
have.
my experience as well, I have so many family that I am not close with at all, and they're my blood. And I have so many friends that I am super close with, and they would die for me, and I die for them. And they're not my blood. They're just
Exactly.
friends that we meet, right?
Exactly.
I think, like, honestly, family is the people that have your back. Family is the people that, you know, you need them, they're there for you. And when they need you, you're there for them. That denotes family to me in this day and age. Maybe in times gone past, blood meant more. And I think in today's society, with just how connected everybody is and just how different the world is, even technology-wise and socially-wise, that's what's important, is keeping those friends close to you that care for you and keep in touch with you. And I think, honestly, that's kind of what I wanted to do with my life, is I didn't want to be, and I think now my perspective is one of, I don't want to be the guy that says religion's wrong, because everyone's experience is different. I think if you have an experience with God that you can feel in some tangible way, that you know in your heart you have that connection, I have mad respect for you. And I want you to pursue that to the fullest of its potential. And the same thing goes for my kid, is if he ever has an experience with God that he believes is genuine and that he can experience in some way, I would encourage that as far as it will go. Please, like, pursue that, because ultimately you only live once. And if there is such a thing as a God out there, then absolutely make contact. Be friends with that guy, right? For me, I've never had that experience. I've never had that tangible experience where I could say, God is real, God is, like, I can only agree that there's way more to the universe than I'll ever be able to comprehend. And I can agree that there is very likely, has to be, a being out there that's keeping this whole system running. There's no way, like, the universe can
It can't be an
defy the
accident.
laws. No. Like, the laws of thermodynamics, everything's going to divulge into chaos. That's rule number one of physics. So for this world to defy all of that, and the sun to keep orbiting, or the earth to keep orbiting the sun, and
There must
universe
be a
could,
reason.
there has to be.
Mhm.
And beyond a reason, there has to be like a power source behind all of that, and that would be God. So
Mhm.
I have no qualms with accepting that. That's not beyond even scientifical
Mhm.
imagination. Beyond how he affects like human beings, I think ultimately that's for each human to discover. And if religion, if a system of worship is the way that you discover that, and that's how you get connected, then by all
Mhm.
means, right?
Mhm.
For me, that wasn't that way, and so far it hasn't been. I say to everybody, I hope at some point I get to meet God. I hope I get to
Mhm.
meet
Mhm.
Jesus or whoever this being is, and I get a connection, because I feel like that would be a really wonderful experience.
Mhm.
But until that time, then I think being the best person and brother that you can to your friends, that's where it's at for me.
So I appreciate that, and I have a I have a question. It's burning in my mind, and I have to ask it.
Yes.
And there's this thing called extreme ownership. So
Hmm.
I'm going to put the onus on you.
Sure.
If there was something that you could have first, if there was something that you could have done differently, um, or do you think that there is something that you first of all could have done differently, whereby you may have still been attending some church, if possible? What would that be? And if there's something that the church that you were a part of could have done differently, what would that be in your eyes?
Oh, for sure, there could have been a lot been done differently for me. Like, I think if I would have just taken more of an active role in starting things, and this is something the pastor even brought up to me in some of our conversations. Well, if you had ideas, why didn't you bring them up? And
Mm-hmm.
why didn't you see them through? Well, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. That's a genuine possibility. I could have started a ministry. I could have started a program within the church and,
Mm-hmm.
gotten people interested in it. And we could have started doing things around the community, be that safe walks, be that picking up needles, be that whatever. I've suggested things.
Mm-hmm.
And in my line of work in security, we meet a lot of need for that, of course,
Mm-hmm.
with the communities that we deal with. I deal with a lot of like outreach programs that
Mm-hmm.
already exist just from the city, funded by the government.
Mm-hmm.
We could be another one of those for sure, and that would be a
Mm-hmm.
huge help to the community. I think that would be probably one of the most impactful ways that the church could help, and I could
Mm-hmm.
have been the guy to start that
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'll accept that. Secondly, on my own, could I have spent more time? And I think it boils down to time spent, right? Like, I think if you really genuinely believe in something, then for sure you're going to make that thing, whatever it is, happen. If it's a business idea, if it's a dream of yours to go on vacation somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you'll find a way to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, what really made the difference there is I just didn't have that. How shall we say, like a spark, so to speak. I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
that little extra that would push you to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I think what could have been the difference in that respect would have been perhaps the church actually giving me a job,
Mm-hmm.
keeping me interested.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would have been the difference. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure. I feel like the church does a really poor job of keeping people. They do a really good job of bringing people
Bringing
in,
them in. Mm-hmm.
but they do a very poor job of keeping them. And I think my experience may shed some light on that,
Mm-hmm.
where not having a job for new converts and just letting, and I talked to the pastor about this actually
Mm-hmm.
in detail the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, what happened? Like, why didn't I never get a call from you? Like, why didn't, 2 years I've been out of the church and never get a call from you once?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, like, we don't necessarily bug people that we feel don't want to be bugged.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's this maybe mentality within the church of, well, no, if they need us, they'll contact us. They know where we are.
Mm-hmm.
When in the story in the Bible, it was the shepherd actively went and looked for the sheep that were lost. He didn't just wait for the sheep to call
Mm-hmm.
home and be like, hey, I need a ride back to the farm.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I feel like the church could do a lot more to like involve the membership
Mm-hmm.
and make it more than just a weekly event that you go to and
Mm-hmm.
that's your brownie points for the week and
Mm-hmm.
you're a good Adventist by going to church.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the whole culture of Adventism needs to change,
Mm-hmm.
where people, it's a way of life for them. It's an everyday thing. There's always something going on that they can do and they can involve themselves with, be it a community outreach program, be it a ministry of some sort, be it something
Mm-hmm.
like this, where we're doing something to impact the community. And
Mm-hmm.
bring the mission of the church to the forefront and people can see it, not just behind closed doors where people think we're a cult.
And, and I'm glad that you brought that up because you are right. Because in all fairness, David has mentioned to me about the Bear Clan, picking up needles and stuff like that, and being more involved in the community. And I did pass the message on because I wasn't at that point in time. I wasn't the one who was in leadership,
Right.
but as in youth lead at the
I
time.
think both of us have passed that message on to the actual people in
Yeah.
charge a lot. And
Yeah.
what's come of the idea is really in the church's hands, right? Like, we can't control that. I think, though, I'm still very much interested in doing something like that. And I think now, like, as time goes on and as my
And
career
places
advances,
opening up as well.
yeah, like with things like that happening, I feel like there'll be a lot more opportunity for me to provide a means if someone was interested.
Mhm.
That, even with my connections currently, where I could say, okay, you know what, if you wanted to be involved, I could be a partner. I could bring some of my guys in as volunteers to help provide you security, for example, as I work in the industry. If there was a group of people from the church that wanted to go under overpasses and check up on people and see if they were okay, or if people wanted to go walk downtown and collect needles and they're, it's a group of girls or young adults and they don't feel safe, for sure I could bring a few of my guys in full gear and you guys would have no issues. No one would give you problems.
Okay.
So that's something that I could contribute, and I'd still be absolutely interested in doing that.
I,
And I feel like as time goes on, that's always going to be something available. Ultimately, what the church does with it is it's in their hand.
that's true, and I definitely thank you for that input because that's actually what this is for. It's not just to just walk and listen; it's to actually be the change agent
Yes.
that we see that we need, or our community needs,
Mhm.
and and I can see that there is still a passion in you, David, for first of all for God or the being that you ultimately want to meet at the end of time,
Absolutely.
and also that you want to be a great father and a great husband and stuff like that. And I am definitely proud of you for that.
Appreciate that.
Because there are many people who could have gone your path and it be worse. And
I feel like it could have divulged into negativity quite easly, where you become very bitter and upset. And that's something that I don't think I've ever. I don't like that. It detracts from the enjoyment of life when you're negative and bitter against people. I have so much reason to be negative and bitter against my family for the way that they've treated me, be it for disowning me for having a girlfriend of color, be it for whatever reason it might be, not wanting to talk to me because, I had a kid outside of marriage, whatever the reason might be. I have a lot of reason to be bitter, but there's no reason to harbor those kind of feelings because life's too short. And I feel like the maybe I'm the messenger of positivity here, but keeping a positive outlook on life, keeping an objective point of view, and not making enemies needlessly. I think that's the whole goal. And for me, I want to help the community. I feel like the work that I do now, providing security for businesses and what have you, it's definitely not the nicest way for some members of the community. They don't feel welcomed at all because obviously they're not welcomed on the premises. And I do feel bad for them, but at the same time, I'm getting paid to do that kind of thing, to kick people out and to keep people, out of certain areas. That's security in general. What I would like to evolve into eventually is helping those kind of people in some way, because I see a lot of hopelessness in Winnipeg, and I see a lot of people that they have no idea that there's a better life.
no idea.
And they're raised surrounded by gangs and surrounded by violence and domestic
drugs.
abuse and drugs, and a lot of them have mental disabilities coming right out of the womb from whatever substances their parents were abusing when they were pregnant.
Exactly.
And so you have this cycle of violence and abuse, and
Being perpetuated.
it's a snake that eats its own tail. And I see it every day, and I see people being born into it. I see little kids running around in it, and it breaks my heart. And I'd like to see somebody do something about that. I know the government would never throw enough money at it to fix it, because ultimately the government's that's not something they're capable of. It's something that the community has to do in and of itself. And I think if I could be part of a movement within the community that would stand up to gang violence and stand up to, you know, domestic abuse, and show everybody, hey, you know what, there's people who, they understand these things happen, but they don't want that to be the norm. They don't want,
Yeah.
they're not willing to accept that as, oh, well, that's just Winnipeg. It's, you know, Stab Central.
Stab Central.
Or, you know, it's the carjacking capital of the world. One of our units actually got carjacked last night. It's all over the
Wow.
news. It's hilarious.
Wow.
Guy just didn't lock the doors. So we're going to have a conversation with him. But the point is, like, Winnipeg could be so much more if everyone was united in a singular movement to stand up to this kind of thing, to want to have something better. And that's what I'd like to be involved in.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because most of the change doesn't really happen from the top.
Never.
It has to happen from a community grassroots base.
Absolutely.
And that is something that, you know, this could divulge into a whole nother extra hour speaking.
Oh, absolutely.
But I see that there's a deep desire and a deep great vision that you have in your heart, and I am here for it. Meaning I'm here to support you in any way you need.
Well, it's gonna take a lot more than you and me.
It
York.
is.
But I think the key to this is what I want to do, and what I see is uniting people on a common interest. And if that's upbuilding the community, making our place a safer place to live, we're going to need all resources. And so that's why I don't want to make enemies with anyone. I don't want to cut anyone off. You know, ultimately, maybe my vision's bigger than the four walls of a church, or maybe bigger than what the four walls of a church could ever offer.
Yeah.
Given that, you know, each church has their own peculiar viewpoints and beliefs. But what I would like to see is the community become a better place and a safer place for our children to grow up in, and for you to have my respect and be able to raise your child the way you want to, and for me to be able to raise my kid the way I'd like to, without us judging each other and calling hateful comments at each other. I think if our community could become that, then we'd have accomplished something in our lifetime.
That's true.
And I think that should be the focus of us, of this, of, you know, whatever we work on, be it for a religious cause or not. It should be to upbuild humanity and lift people out of the really messed up situations that they find themselves in.
True. I agree totally with you on that. And you know, it being the husband of a wife who is a nurse,
Yes.
you and my wife and you have seen some of the similar things.
Absolutely.
You know, babies being born with their
Her job
mothers.
must be the most heartbreaking, I would say.
Yeah, because she actually deals with the mothers and the babies.
Yes.
So it like sometimes she comes and she just wants to just decompress.
Of course.
And hearing this from you and getting it from her on a daily basis, I'm like, there something needs to be done. And the four walls of a church, well, the church isn't really the building, but it's the people. But the church as a set of people needs to, you know, exit the building more.
Yes.
And be
And-
more a change agent.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I've always seen with churches is they're super afraid to partner with other groups. You know, I feel like there's this whole fear of like the ecumenical movement moving into the church, and I'm now getting into like more advanced, because again, I was raised with it, right? But there's this whole, you know, uniting of the churches, with the Catholic Church heading things up, and many churches, like, they're afraid of that. And I think the Adventist Church is one of them, because they're this very devout Protestant organization, very similar to the Hutterites, the Mennonites, where you don't want to be part of anything else because you're afraid you'll get contaminated, your beliefs will get watered down. But I believe there is a way where you could partner with community, and where you could partner with businesses and other parts that are not religious, and still maintain your uniqueness.
Yes.
I believe, like, the Mennonites have been probably the most successful at that because they have their own colleges and their own things going on,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're very active in the community. They have their furniture stores, they have their thrift stores.
Mm-hmm.
They're out there,
Mm-hmm.
but yet they're separate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that there's a way that the Adventist Church could do that. I don't think a lot of thought has been put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if a lot of the smart people of the church put their heads together and said, okay, how could we work with the community
Mm-hmm.
and be a positive agent for change
Mm-hmm.
and still retain our belief and our uniqueness and not be watered down.
Yeah.
I think that would be something the church could really work on, and I think that should be the focus, not maintaining the old members. And that's something I see a lot of, where you're just you're making sure everybody's good, right? Because you're worried that they're gonna, like, I don't know, lose faith or whatever, right? But
Walk away and not have tithe paying members of the church, stuff like that.
yes, and I agree. Like, that's a big concern for the churches. They're always worried about their bottom line. They're worried about making money. They're worried about keeping the people, like, on track that direction. But you're losing the focus of the church, which is ultimately to better the community.
Mm.
So there has to be a balance there, and I think the focus should shift away from keeping the old members happy and making sure the tithe stays at whatever level it's at.
Mm-hmm.
Be willing to accept a loss in the short term to gain a much bigger benefit,
And in the long term.
which is the safer community, a community of people that recognize us and be like, oh, that's the Adventists. Look, they cleaned up downtown. Like, they really did a difference. Like, this summer, did you see them out there every day, every week? They were doing safe walks. They were doing, garbage collection, whatever it might be. They were out there talking to people. And
Or there's an Adventist gym, or there's an Adventist thrift store.
absolutely. Like, these are all things that we could do and work on. There's an Adventist soup kitchen. There's, like, a rescue shelter for women that are being abused by their husbands. Like, there's so much more that we
I
could
mean,
do.
there are many Adventist schools all over the world, but I agree, we could be doing much more.
We have the resources.
Yeah.
Don't tell me we don't. We have the knowledge and the know-how.
Mm-hmm.
We have every possible resource. I think of one of the only denominations in the world that's really organized that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have invaluable resources from Ellen G. White writings, and I could talk about that for ages, about how many valuable resources that we have that we don't use.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I think that's something that we could work on
Yeah.
as brothers, and as something,
Definitely.
partnerships, working on involving the members.
And it's not just us, but anyone else who is listening to this or
Yes.
who is interested. The information will be, the email will be at the end of this podcast for you to get into and message us if you so desire, or the information will be down below.
And I don't want to be another one of those people that's like, oh, well, if you just, like, donate money to this cause, or if you just, like,
I don't like those.
no, I hate that. That's
I
just
don't
another
like
one of the same thing. I think what we need to be is just like,
You start something, they see you working,
yes,
and if they want to buy into it or donate into it, then that's fine. Or if they want to be a part of it, that's fine.
I think it should be even bigger than that. I think it should be, everybody should have something of their own, but yet we all come together and we each have our own strength and our own weakness that we then use in a common cause.
Yeah.
So if my thing is security and your thing is
Media.
podcast and media, then let's figure out a way where all of those pieces of the puzzle can connect together to make one grand picture
Yeah.
for the community's betterment. If you're making podcasts that help, uplift the community on that respect, and if your filmmaking work showcases some of the issues that the community is having so that the government can step in and start fixing it. And
Or if you have someone who has immigration problems and you have an immigration consultant on hand.
absolutely, like, our job should be to connect resources with people that need it.
Or if you need a nutritionist and stuff like that, because the Adventist Church is big on nutrition and health.
Absolutely. And like the church even has at this very time, like, divorce counseling and
Yes.
different things going on.
Grief
That is a
counseling.
huge resource to the
And
community.
even now there's a leadership council about to start. Yeah.
Absolutely. So all of these things, I believe, would be big. That these are pieces of the puzzle,
Yeah.
but it's not the whole puzzle. And I think that's where people get really hung up on, is that they believe whatever they're doing is the whole puzzle. It's not.
No.
And so long as you realize you're just a part, but there's something greater at work, then for sure we're going to be
Dude.
successful at this.
Yeah. And I thank you so much, David. I'm sure this is going to be the first of many different thought sessions we're going to have.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your views on things and the way how you kind of brought stuff together as to your journey, and you're continuing on this journey.
Absolutely.
And if there is someone or something that you'd like to say as a last word, what would you like to say?
Oh goodness, I'm not good with ending raps here, but yeah, no, I think one thing is key here is that keep learning, keep always looking for something more. Like you should never get to the point where it's like, oh, I've seen everything. I think both of us were just getting started at all of this.
Yeah.
And I think there's a whole lot more to our lives that's about to happen, and a lot more cool things that are going to be coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, never lose sight of where we were at, the things that we've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I,
Both of us were janitors.
yeah, and I think we've both been through a lot of things. Our paths have definitely diverged on many points,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, they're very similar. Young
Mhm.
fathers and growing families, and both of us struggling financially and
Mhm.
trying to make it in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the start of something really cool. So
Thanks.
let's see where this ends up.
Thanks. I appreciate it, David. And that's it for this episode of What's It Like. We had our guest in here, David, and we'd like to thank you, our valued listeners, for listening. And tune in again next time for What's It Like with YORX. I'm your host, YORX, and take care. Feel free to reach out to us at what'sitlikewithyorks@gmail.com or leave a comment in the comment section. What's It Like with YORX is recorded at Imagine Studios with me, Yorkwin. Edited by Yorkwin. Produced by Yorkwin. Music by Trilo XV.